Try to imagine your neighborhood with no number to call, no judge, no jail down the street. Just you and everyone around you deciding together what happens when someone does something wrong. That's not a hypothetical. That's how every human lived for 297,000 of the last 300,000 years. And the system they built to keep each other in check was more brutal, more effective, and stranger than anything we use today. No handcuffs, no holding cells, no 911. And yet, small hunter-gatherer bands, groups of 15 to 50 people, managed to live together for tens of thousands of years without collapsing into constant violence. Think about that for a second. You couldn't just block someone, move to a new neighborhood, or avoid them at work. If someone in your band wronged you, you were still going to see them tomorrow, and the day after that, sleeping 20 feet away, eating from the same fire. There was no walking away from it. So what was actually stopping people from killing each other? It wasn't fear of the law. There was no law. It was something else, something that still runs underneath your life right now, even though you probably don't notice it anymore. Reputation. In a group of 30 people, you can't hide anything. Every argument, every act of kindness, every time you shared meat or hoarded it, every time you helped carry firewood or wandered off while everyone else worked, all of it got talked about. Anthropologists studying groups like the Huanzi of the Kalahari found that gossip wasn't idle chatter. It was a functioning legal system running in real time, with no judge except everyone at once. If you built a reputation as selfish, violent, or untrustworthy, people stopped sharing food with you. They stopped including you in hunts. They stopped protecting you when something dangerous showed up. Losing your reputation could be as dangerous as losing a limb. There's a specific example anthropologists love to bring up. Successful hunters in these groups were routinely mocked, not praised, for a big kill. Anthropologist Richard Lee documented this directly among the Huanzi, where an entire animal carcass might be dismissed by the group as scrawny or worthless, right in front of the hunter who brought it in. Lee eventually learned this wasn't rudeness. It was deliberate. The group was preventing something specific: pride. A hunter who felt like the best, the most important, the most powerful, was a hunter who might start acting like he didn't need to follow the group's rules anymore, so they took him down a peg before he ever got the chance to rise too high. Conflict, in other words, was being prevented before it started by keeping anyone from feeling untouchable, but reputation only works on people who care what the group thinks. So what happened when someone didn't? That's where the second tool came in: ostracism. If gossip and mockery failed, if someone kept stealing, kept fighting, kept putting the group at risk, the response escalated. People stopped talking to them entirely. They weren't invited to sit at the fire. They weren't told when the group was moving camp. In small societies like this, ostracism wasn't a mild inconvenience. It was closer to a death sentence with a delay. You needed the group to hunt safely, to share food during a bad season, to help you if you got sick or hurt. Cut off from all of that, alone in a landscape full of predators and unpredictable weather, most people didn't survive being cast out for long. Being ignored in this world could kill you slower than a spear, but just as surely. And then there was the third tool: execution. When gossip and exile both failed, when someone in the group was genuinely dangerous, a repeat killer, someone who wouldn't stop hurting others, the group sometimes made a final decision together. A man who had killed multiple members of the community was eventually killed by the group itself, in a coordinated act that the community, including members of his own family, quietly agreed to beforehand. There was no trial. There didn't need to be one. Everyone already knew what he'd done. The decision wasn't made by one angry person. It was made collectively, which is exactly why it worked. No single person had to carry the guilt or the risk of revenge alone. This pattern shows up again and again across small-scale societies studied by anthropologists. Reputation first, exile second, and only as an absolute last resort, collective execution. All three of these tools worked because everyone involved belonged to the same tiny world and depended on each other to survive. But what happened when the person who wronged you wasn't part of your group at all? That's where things got messier, and in some places a lot stranger. Among Inuit communities in the Arctic, serious disputes, even accusations of theft or wife stealing, were sometimes settled with something called a song duel. Two men would stand in front of the entire camp and take turns mocking each other and rhyming improvised insults, sometimes for hours, sometimes across several nights. The community decided who landed the sharper insults, and whoever won was considered to have won the dispute itself. No weapon was drawn. No blood was spilled. The conflict ended in laughter instead of a feud. In parts of Papua New Guinea, anthropologists studying groups like the Enga documented a completely different solution: compensation. If someone from one clan killed someone from another, war didn't automatically follow. Instead, the killer's entire clan would negotiate a payment. Pigs, shells, sometimes both, handed over to the victim's family. It didn't erase the loss, but it functioned like a formal apology with real weight behind it, heavy enough to stop a single death from turning into years of retaliatory killing. Not every situation found a way around it, though. When none of these tools existed, when two groups shared no reputation system, no trusted elders, no tradition of song duels or compensation, conflict between bands could spiral into exactly what you'd expect: raiding, ambush, and revenge cycles that sometimes ran for generations. This system wasn't gentle, and it wasn't always fair. It relied on consensus, which meant popular people could sometimes get away with things unpopular people couldn't. It relied on gossip, which meant it could be shaped by whoever controlled the story. It worked well enough to hold together bands of humans for hundreds of thousands of years with no courthouse in sight. So here's the strange part: you live in a society with actual laws, actual police, actual courts, and you probably assume that's the only thing standing between you and chaos. But most of what actually keeps your day-to-day behavior in check isn't a courtroom. It's the same three tools your ancestors used 300,000 years ago, just wearing modern clothes. The fear of being talked about, excluded, quietly written off by the people around you, that's not a relic. That's the original justice system, still running underneath the one we built on top of it. We didn't replace the ancient system. We just added a second one on top of it and slowly forgot the first one was ever there. Every group chat you're part of, every workplace, every neighborhood, still runs on the same three tools, whether anyone admits it or not. Reputation decides who gets trusted with responsibility. Quiet exclusion decides who stops getting invited. And in the rare extreme cases, a community still decides, together, that someone has to go. Take away the police, the courts, the entire legal system tomorrow, and most people wouldn't turn into monsters overnight. They'd just fall back on the same tools their ancestors used for 297,000 years. Watch each other, talk about each other, and decide together who gets to stay.